The following is a presentation of Morning Drive Media.
From the middle of the battle to the fiery fringes, we're here. Casterly Talk. We've got a big one to dive into, and I cannot do that alone and refuse to do it alone. Don't want to do it alone. We all need friends in battle, and we have the normal cast of characters here. Andrews Cabrera, Rachel Cushing, and Lon Harris. Welcome, friends. Ace, still watching the show because you're trying to get some notes in. How are you?
I don't know. I survived, Ken. I survived. It's wild. Man. I'm sorry I'm doing that.
No.
Don't
apologize.
Say something about a point.
I'll go behind the curtain here. Casterly Talk, we've been recording on Monday nights, looking at the episodes, giving us time as a team to rewatch, make notes. Lon helps produce the Watching Throne show on the Fandom Entertainment Channel, so we all come in a little more prepared. I'm the a-hole who planned a trip to Vegas, a yearly trip. I go out for the Cauliflower Alley Club, and I'm leaving in the morning. So we recorded this about an hour after watching the episode. Some emotions are still raw. Not all of our notes are perfect. We might miss things, but we're going to try to get it all done here. And Rachel, are you ready for this challenge?
Maybe. I think that I love the way our podcast works, which is that we sort of go with the flow and we bounce off of each other and we go by theme rather than necessarily by plot a lot of the time. And I have a feeling tonight will be particularly led by our emotional reaction to this, which, you know what? Maybe that's the way to go for an episode like this one.
We might come back with a follow-up episode, or we'll all have thoughts. We'll do some more next week. But Lon, I know you're so great with notes. I kind of want to see what you're doing on your own. I want to see you wheeling and dealing in battle. What you can come up with.
I'm on my heels today because usually I'd be looking things up and I would be sort of double checking everything I thought, and I didn't have a chance. I literally finished watching the episode and walked out the door to come here. So
and I appreciate you all accommodating my travel schedule.
It's really raw.
Otherwise, I would have been in a hotel room for this one watching on a MacBook, which was okay for episode 1, though the hotel ended up having HBO. I would not want to have watched this one for the first time on a MacBook. Big fact, I wish I was watching it like on IMAX. At a theater.
Oh, could you imagine? Oh my God.
If only wish. So this is episode 3, The Long Night, written by Dan and Dave, directed by Miguel Sapochnik. We knew going in, Rachel. I remember when the directors were announced some time ago. You and I were probably texting, and you were geared up for Sapochnik and battle.
Of course. I mean, we all know what he did with Battle of the Bastards, and that sort of surprisingly, because the show just kept one-upping itself, upped itself again with just a truly visceral battle, and a weirdly personal one, because you were so in the mind of Jon Snow in that battle. And so not only is it a production feat of feats, it was also very character-driven and very personal. And that balance is something you want for this climactic battle, because this was the battle. This is the 7+ seasons leading up to battle. And, when we saw what he was able to do with that episode, we knew he was the right guy for this one to give us all of the character stuff that we needed, but also give us all the spectacle we needed. And damn, did he deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. We always like to get overall thoughts. I turn to you, Lon, first for just some kind of the general feel, emotions. And look, we're going to dive into some things and this and that, and that's part of why we do this. I like to come at it from a celebratory status or point of view. But, Lon, where are you at right now? Do you need a hug?
Loved the sense, as we tend to get with Game of Thrones battles. And I saw a lot of people on social media sort of immediately comparing this to Helm's Deep comes up a lot. This like Lord of the Rings battles. They're always ground level. We're not watching, it's not a God's eye view. This isn't Kurosawa or Barry Lyndon, or even like what Peter Jackson's doing in those Lord of the Rings films, where it's you're up in the air and here's where the orcs are and here's where all the armors are. This is what the experience would be like to be in Winterfell. It's being invaded. You don't know where the threat is coming from. It's chaotic. It's confusing. I thought the episode really nailed that. And I think that a lot of the reactions that we're seeing from people where it's like, it's so dark, it's so confusing, I didn't have a good feel for the geography of where everybody was and what was going on. It's like, well, yeah, that would be what it's like to be in a castle that's being invaded by zombies.
Yeah, one of my notes here was I put this, if you can't follow the battle, just try again. Just watch it a second time. And I don't mean that being snotty or snobby. Just watch it again.
Well, and I mean, I feel like, after a few viewings, you probably will get a better sense for here's the dynamics of how everything sort of played out, which is, you want to know and is interesting. But I think when you're first watching it, the first time through, it's about the impact. It's about what this is like to experience, what it's like for these characters.
Yeah.
And I think on that level, it was really, it was tremendous. It really worked gangbusters on that level of just the spectacle from a individual standpoint.
Right. Like a red wine with some good dark chocolate, pair it with last week's episode, and you have a two-part masterpiece. Andresa, I'm crying because I lost my guy.
Ooh.
I mean, you can ask my girlfriend. I had to clutch her arms and did the cry because it really got to me of 7+ years of story with Jorah Mormont. But your guys survived, so you okay?
He did.
Both his guys did. And I could have sworn one of them was going down. There was a moment where I was like, that's it for Grey Worm. He's about to sacrifice himself
I did
to take
me.
out that trench, to light the trench. And I was like, that's it. And all I could think of was poor Andres. And then it didn't happen. And I was like, man, both his guys survived. I can't complain because one of his guys is my guy, but still.
I think you deserve this, Andres.
I am so relieved. I am so happy. My boy, I was cheering for it the whole time. This is real. I know a lot of people are like, really? Grey Worm? Yes, really.
No, Grey Worm's great.
Grey Worm is literally one of, if not my favorite characters left on Game of Thrones. And he went off. I mean, that guy was, runner up for one of the MVPs of the episode. And I told you beforehand, like, I love to pick, like, and I did it for Endgame too, pick like MVPs, like who came in clutch, who was the, who shot the, 3-pointer, who put a Damian Lillard. And I gotta say, it was the director, man. So what he delivered with this episode, and there's a lot of hype surrounding it, and I get why people want to be like disappointed or wanted more brightness in the episode, or wanted to be able to see more clearly or more deaths. I mean, what he delivered was absolutely incredible. Just not just the ground battle, not just the fire, but the aerial fights that we saw with the dragons. Oh my, like making you feel so much emotion for these characters, and the shots that he used, the direction. I just really feel like the MVP of this episode by far is the director, and he is just on a different level.
Has he got more in this season? Is Nutter's coming back,
I
Rachel?
think he's got
right?
one more.
I thought he did have
I
one
want to
more.
say almost everybody that was on the list for this season had
He has
multiple
one more.
episodes.
And that's
Okay,
me
yeah.
just reaching, but I think
Yeah,
so.
I think you're right. But
Speaking of deaths, though, I feel like I gotta jump in here.
Jump in, Lon.
This is one I'm very surprised at the number of major characters that survived. I'm not even necessarily talking about is that realistic considering what a sort of route the battle is. I think you do have to consider that on one level, but it is interesting to me that they've left so many people in play. I mean, we only have 3 episodes left.
Right.
There's a lot of characters who survived who I think we all assumed not only because of the impact it would have on us to see them die, but because we'd be getting them out of the way.
The way, so to speak. Right.
And now that they're around, they're not out of the way. And you start thinking about characters like Varys, who we've left in the mix, that I think a lot of us assumed people like that might be dwindling in number, and they're not. I mean, the Hound is still around, and Jaime and Tyrion Lannister are both still around.
Pod's still here.
Pod's
Sam's
still-
still
yeah.
here. Gendry's still
the
here.
one that you guys haven't named that I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I know people love this guy, but my God, Tormund
Still going.
is still alive. How?
It's almost shocking to me that they've done that just because of the difficulty they're painting themselves into.
Sure.
I mean, of course, you want there were a lot of moments, maybe 1 or 2 too many
of savings.
you think that a character's
Yes.
done for, and then whoop, someone's going to swoop in. It's always a rousing, crowd-pleasing moment, but they did that so many times. They've left so many characters on the table.
It's an
surprised.
No, it's
go
an
ahead.
interesting note because when we watch it a second time, or you watch it next year, I might feel that more. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think I'm definitely caught up in the first viewing of, okay, they're alive. I wonder. That's an interesting point on a second rewatch. If you feel that, if I feel that personally, I think it does happen. It does happen a lot. So
it happens a lot, and it's just that we've left ourselves so many characters that we still have to deal with now. In addition, because obviously we King's Landing, there's characters there. Bronn is sort of en route between King's Landing and the north. Still
he didn't show up,
but they've done themselves not a ton of favors in terms of economy of storytelling because with only 3 hours or 4 hours left. Well, wow, we've got a lot of people still to set in place.
What's interesting about that when you talk about done themselves no favors is you might then have to deal with a quicker ending for a Brienne story, or is her story end with a kiss with Jaime and that's all you get versus we don't have we have 3 episodes, not 6 episodes or 9 or 7 episodes. So that's an interesting point.
The Starks. I mean, we haven't really thinned the ranks of the Starks in many seasons now.
Yeah,
a lot of Starks.
Of Starks still going on here. All right, I think we need to start diving in as best we can. We know where this goes, but where this began, I loved the continuation, I should say, of the calm before the storm. I really like this carrying out. I thought for a second, I was like, is it going to start like season 3 starts with the screams of battle, the fist of the first men? We know we don't really see a lot in that battle, but Rachel, I was wondering, you're an editor, do you just boom pop in with this, or I loved that they took their time.
I did too, because it did feel like you could watch the last frame from last week's episode and the first frame of this one and feel a continuation with it. And I loved the idea of Sapochnik starting this all with this great tracking shot, and you're with Sam and you're just following him through Winterfell, and you're getting a little sense of the lay of the groundwork inside the courtyard and everything. And Sam's such a great character because he's just like, you can tell he's scared, he's a little bumbling, and he's reacting to all the things that he's seeing around him. And then you see Lyanna Mormont pop up behind him, and then you cut over and you see Bran and the Ironborn heading to the Heart Tree. And so you're just getting a sense of all the pieces and that they're still waiting because they don't know the exact moment this is going to happen. And so we're waiting with them. And so to travel around and then pop outside and people are waiting in the front ranks. We got the shots from the teaser with Brienne and Pod and Jaime in front of their left flank, and then Jorah in front of the Dothraki, and Sansa and Arya and Davos on the parapet. So like you just have a sense of like, okay, everybody's as ready as you possibly can be, which is not even remotely ready enough, but like on edge. And I thought that was a great way to pick up exactly where we left off, but also set the stage for this one. And can I just say, I loved having Dany and Jon take the dragons to like this cliff view, just to get a sense of, because it's at night.
Little perspective.
And it's perspective, and I love, it's just beautiful too, because it's at night and you see the fires of Winterfell and you can see the faint gleaming of the armor and whatnot, and then you just see blackness. You know what's out there, but you can't see them yet, and you don't have a sense for sure. And then I know we'll get into it, but like the Melisandre arriving and lighting the Dothraki arcs on fire, and that charge from that point of view, that shot was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, and such a great visual representation of the good guys with the fire and the light, basically disappearing into the dark.
Oh, so good. So
It's
good.
so good.
Great start. I love that Sam's the point of view here, Andres. We see him nervously getting ready and all the preparations like Rachel was
and
saying.
It's a wonder.
Here.
He loves wonders, man.
Yeah.
He loves wonders, and he's good at them.
Yeah.
I got to follow up with what Rachel's heading down, and that's that opening, like Melisandre coming in, lighting the sword. It's like, we got a chance, guys. And then the Dothraki charging.
Right?
And it's like, yeah.
I mean, they play
and then
with
all of a sudden, it's like they run into the wave of the undead, and lights their fire starts dimming, and it's gone. And they're like, did we just lose our best fighters in 2 seconds?
We'll pick that thread up, but I didn't say one word during the view, and I sat here in silence with Grace. I said one word, Melisandre. That's all I said at the beginning when she showed up, and I thought that was perfect. And what's been going on, if you go back, and I don't want to pick up where you were talking, going to, Ace, when you go back 7 years, and last week was the highlight, like that, it's the journey for everyone. And Melisandre's journey, burnings of little girls and all, leads to this moment and what happens with this character when she returns earlier than I thought. I thought, I think we've talked last week about she might be the Gandalf at Helm's Deep type thing. She shows up. I love this moment because it sets up false hope, Ace. False hope.
It was I told you I cracked up. I laughed so hard, and I know that's wrong for me to do, but
I know what
it
you
was
mean.
kind of funny. It was that moment of like dark humor of like we did it. Oh, we're all dead.
one by one, Lon, the flames start going out. What do you think it is? The Dothraki?
I mean,
wiped away.
it's a very Game of Thrones-y touch because we've spent seasons, literal seasons of the show watching Daenerys fight and scrape to get this army together, to take control of this army. I mean, all of season 1, and then again, she goes back to Vice Dothrak.
Right.
She lights all of their leaders on fire, and she takes control. All of that work, and it's snuffed out in literally a few moments.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is a lot of what sort of Game of Thrones is about, like this asset that you think you absolutely can't do without. I think it's also interesting in light of the show has made such a point for the past several weeks to show us the sort of, if not outright bigotry of people at Winterfell, the racial animosity, the fact that these are sheltered Northerners who maybe aren't used to seeing people from other races.
Right.
They're a little bit standoffish, and in true historical fashion, the first wave that was sent out to defend them were people of color who were
Dothraki.
snuffed out almost immediately.
Head on out.
They were the one who sacrificed. So again, a little bit of sort of real history sort of in there a little
Which
bit.
George R.R. Martin would appreciate there. And I know what you mean, Ace. It was that dark humor. It's kind of everyone's like, oh, no.
It was amazing. And then the fact that we got their POV of like, they didn't say a word. They just kind of said, they were like, oh.
The lack of dialogue throughout this episode was very effective, Rachel. You're excited about that?
It would just to piggyback on that, the idea that we understand that roller coaster of emotion and also the plot points that are being hit without a lick of dialogue. Like, you get it. You send out your cavalry first. And again, the entire battle is built around, we want the Night King to make it through, to get him to a point. Bran is bait. We know this isn't winnable. So, some people would think, well, like, don't send your cavalry out on like a seemingly, pointless charge. It is and it isn't. It's a sacrifice for sure. And you get that brief moment of hope when you see all of the Arrax light on fire. And you see, I think it's Sansa and Arya on the wall. And they both have this look of like, oh, wow. Oh, this is good. This is good. This is an unexpected good thing. So you have that moment of hope, and then you have the beauty of the shot, and then you have the horror of the light literally being snuffed out, and you haven't even really seen the dead yet. They're still clouded and shrouded in the dark. The sound design in this episode, top notch. Ramin Djawadi's score, oh my God. Like, all of it, just all together tells the story without, if you wrote down all the lines of dialogue, would it be a page, 2 pages at tops for this
easy
episode?
copy at it.
Yeah.
I love too, because we knew this isn't going to win it. Dothraki aren't going to win it.
Right.
But I love sometimes in some predictability, in predictable moments, it's not about that. It's experience it as the characters, and I was you're pulled in of the horror. I go back to Hard Home when the dogs start barking,
exactly,
and you're like,
also
no.
Sapochnik.
Also Sapochnik.
Yeah, he's so good.
Very good point. Going back when the dogs are barking, I'm like, I forget that this is a show. I'm watching a documentary at this point, and
It's
I thought
incredible.
that was effective there.
And can I just say one thing, as again we've let out the point that I was following Grey Worm the most.
Yeah.
The fact that when he put his helmet on, and I know we saw that shot in the trailer, but there's a one quick shot of his eyes just preparing for the undead, and I literally said it out loud. I remembered his line, his famous line where he says, "Unsullied, fear nothing," and I just kept saying that because I was like, oh man, that's being tested right now. But the fact that he looked death in the eyes and he was like, let's go. I was like, yes.
One of the first switches in battle, Lon, here is we see the Dothraki go, like you were talking about, snuffed out, gone, and this is essentially Dany's people in a way. The Khaleesi, let's not forget. the queen of the great grass sea, right? And she's watching, and that is the first mistake because some mistakes are going to happen. And I ain't blaming Danny, but I want to make that clear. She doesn't follow the plan because it means something to her. She is watching her guys, her team die. How do you feel about where the battle starts turning right from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've definitely baked in this idea that she and Jon are going to sort of ride the dragons in at a crucial moment, and I think they sort of purposefully upended our expectations by having it happen very early, and then they fly into this blizzard, and it's just total chaos. And I think that that was essential because we saw that the dragons can really do some damage. I mean, if they're just going through the ranks of the dead, just blowing them all up, I think you kind of had to get them out of the way at a certain point, or else that wave after wave of the army of the dead effect wouldn't really have been possible. So yeah, I like the losing them, the total chaos of dragons in battle and trying to keep up with them, and that would be if you were fighting a war with dragons. Yeah, that would be a real issue. You're not. They don't have radios. You're not. It's not like World War II where you're in touch with.
Because if they did, that's the whole. I also thought the same thing. I was like, if they have those, convenient Avengers comms that are in everyone's ears, Jon and Danny would have pretty good strategy. But the fact that they can't communicate, and they can't see each other.
They put a fine point on it with Davos, where he's trying to signal her to light the
do his job,
light the motivator, and she can't see because she's in a blizzard. And again, I think that comes back to that's so much of what these battle scenes are about on Game of Thrones. It's not about here's a huge epic battle that you're going to see every phase of as it develops. It's like if you were in the middle of this battle, it's a horror movie. I mean, and that's what I thought. So much of the movie took inspiration. We were talking about like the very gradual dread-inducing buildup. I mean, that's right out of a zombie movie where they know that the dead are coming and everybody's waiting, and it's just for that moment. And so much of this, I think, was about that. It's a war scene, but it's survival horror when you get right down to it.
The character moments, I think you even talked about earlier, Rachel. The character moments are important and big because that's why we have these battles. Sometimes we want to see all the cool stuff and the fancy things, and we got a lot of that here. But Andres and I recently did a show about our favorite lightsaber fights, and we talked mostly about what we learned in those battles versus what we saw. What we see sometimes is also important and cool, but we got a lot of character here, Rachel.
Yeah, and I liked, the obvious pairings and the less obvious ones, and, the people that are looking out for each other. And I know Lon sort of attested to there's a few extra getting to your friend's rescue moments, but I, like you, Ken, was caught up in it, and and when you see Jamie starting to get overwhelmed, you're just like getting tenser and tenser, and like this is it. But then Bran comes to the rescue, and I love that. But our first big death was Ed, and and you have poor Sam, who insists on being out on the battlefield for. Good for you, Sam, but you're a no help to anybody out there.
I think he got some kills. He got some kills. He slayed a white before. Yeah,
true enough. He's Walker, Sam the Slayer for a reason.
I know.
But
Dollar said go and kill me.
I know, but it was exactly. He saves Sam and then helps him up, and then boom, stab, and that's the first one. And then I just had like a physical reaction on the couch going, okay, here we go. That one's down, and there's a bunch more to come.
I did this to myself. I just muttered to myself. I was like, that's number one.
Yeah, that's the feeling behind it for sure. But that's a character moment. That's two, brothers of the Night's Watch out in battle together. They've been there before. They fought the dead together before. Here they are again, and this time Ed doesn't make it, and that's the character moment within the chaos within the battle. And I think that there were a lot of those, even something like, I know I'm jumping ahead, but I mean, the death that shocked me the most was Lyanna Mormont.
Yeah,
I turned to my boyfriend. I'm like, they don't usually kill little girls in battles.
No.
This is a new one.
Yeah.
But she goes out like a boss. I mean, because when you see the giant, you're like, okay, who's gonna get the hero moment?
Yeah.
And when it was her, you're like, that's just amazing.
Yeah.
So but it's in her character that at her age, that at being a girl, like none of it matters. She is the lady of the House Mormont. She was going to be out there fighting with her people. She is of the North, from the North, and she's going to go out like a true North man, person, whatever.
Right.
And she takes out a giant doing
That's
it.
great.
And that's character, you
And
know?
Big character
it was an
moment,
incredible
Andres.
moment, and I obviously Lon is wearing the shirt right now. Those two, man, we lost two more
Yeah,
months.
rest in peace, House Mormont.
Jorah and
I'm not
Lyanna.
ready yet to talk about
sorry, we'll
Jorah.
get
I know, but
I'm going to have to get there.
But they have the best. I mean, we can talk about Theon as well, but they go out like bosses. Jorah and Lyanna. Obviously, Lyanna to me that moment, and I kind of had a feeling that Lyanna was going to die, but even I was like, that's kind of dark for her getting squished by a giant. That's really dark.
Right.
But the fact that she killed, I also was like, who's going to kill the giant? Is it going to be Tormund? And have a callback to that, you know, his story. But the fact that it was Lyanna, and the fact that she like stabs him in the eye, and eventually she dies as well. But the fact that it's so much of this, you know, story and so much of Game of Thrones is about legacy, and the fact that she's Lyanna Mormont, the giant slayer, to me is the coolest thing ever.
And we I think all of us got a chance to watch the notes afterwards from Dan and Dave after the episode. Did you get to see some of that?
I didn't,
Rachel?
Unfortunately.
Okay.
I was rushing out the door.
Well,
so.
and I apologize again.
Nope,
I'm going to
no
win.
judgment.
I'm going to win some money in Vegas for all of you. No, but they talked about how Bella Ramsey gets cast, and it was a one scene character.
That was not intentional.
And this happens. This happens in every TV show. Hell, my own girlfriend years ago did one scene and turned into 8 episodes. That's how it works sometimes. And Roz was supposed to be a pilot only, and they liked her. They liked what she brought, and they changed the story. So Bella Ramsey as Lyanna Mormont. What do you do after that moment? I love that they thought this is I think even DB Weiss is like, we'll see what you think, because they record these well before we watch these episodes. But I think this is one of the best endings for a character that wasn't supposed to be there.
100%. I mean, the fact that she goes out like a boss. She goes. I love this the shot where she's charging at the giant white. You know, that scene where she's just screaming and she's going head on to kill a giant, and she does it. And I mean, I still think Gren is a legend.
Gren
in
is
that
too.
scene, one of the best. One of the best episodes, Watchers on the Wall. One of the best moments in that episode where he recites, the Night's Watch and takes down a giant, like Gren the Giant Slayer, and now Lyanna Mormont the Giant Slayer.
But the battle has gone chaotic here. Things are happening here, and Lon, this is again no real surprise in some of this. We understand how stories are told, and we're like we know this is going to be. We're going to give the audience a chance to catch the breath, but things start going wrong. I think when you get the breath of fresh fire, when the trenches are finally lit, you're kind of like, oh, this is a standoff here. I want to kind of dive in the battle at this point here, unless you have anything that you want to say.
No,
Rest in peace about Lyanna Mormont there. What do you think at this point? What are you thinking when you're watching this? The flames are lit.
Yeah, we had a few fire fake out moments where it's like, oh, okay, they've lit the fires. We'll be kind of safe. We were also talking about the Dothraki. They light their swords of fire. Does not really do much. And then later we test out, does dragon fire actually hurt the Night King? And found out, no, it does not. No, it does not. So yeah, I think repeatedly this sort of, finally this weapon that's sort of on our side, and I think it's really fascinating that without the lore, it really highlighted the importance over the last few seasons of the characters actually learning the things that they did, like the discovery of dragonglass being effective, the discovery of Valyrian steel being effective, the discovery of Bran's powers and his ability to do what he can do. Dragons, like unless all of these things had come together, it would have been a rout. There would have been no chance because the traditional things you'd think to do, like frost zombies are coming, light them on fire, don't work. And I thought, that's also. I still feel like I'm going to be a little disappointed if we don't get any more information about the Night King. Like if this is it, if we're closing the book, because we'll save that for the prequel series and we'll focus exclusively. Like he's doing strategy in this. I mean, he's doing military strategy. He's saying, okay, I got to get my army through this fire. We're going to have some of our forces lay down in the fire. We'll sacrifice some and then use them as a bridge. That's not a zombie. A zombie doesn't figure that out. We've seen 10, 12 seasons of The Walking Dead. Zombies fling themselves at the fence. They don't do the raptor test out the different spots and find out, the
weaknesses. I agree.
I want to know a little bit more about like how much like what was going on with him? Who was the Night King, and what was he really capable of?
I think let's put a pin in that, because I think that's going to really lead to talks about what's coming down the line next week, because it's a fair question, and it's I didn't think we'd get. I think I said this is going to be a loss. This is going to be a loss for our heroes.
Yes.
And I think it's a victory, but it's a costly victory in a lot of ways.
I mean, I don't see how you could read this as anything but a huge victory for the forces of being alive.
Yeah, oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
A lot of people died, but
It's a check
not
mark.
everybody.
It's a check.
I was going
mark.
to say much to say Cersei has about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a
I could see her
W.
killing everyone too, just as much as the Night King.
But for this week, this is
you're
a
right.
huge win. I mean, not only do a lot of people survive, but they've wiped out the opposing force.
Kind of going off that, the fact that one of the biggest moments in this episode to me is the fact that the Night King smiles.
I thought that
actually
I gotta say
smiles.
that I was a little surprised.
Yeah. I was like, we've never seen him smile.
This is what I mean. They've done a lot of work this season on. This is not some unthinking, unfeeling automaton. This is not death personified. Because there are things in this episode that are like he's basically just death. He's the Grim Reaper. He's the god of death. Like, what do we say to the god of death? Not today.
Not today.
But no, he doesn't act like the Grim Reaper is literally a skeleton in a cloak that doesn't speak.
Yeah.
And this is a guy. This is a guy who's like, gotcha. He's
having fun.
snarky and he's enjoying himself.
He's having
and,
a good time.
Yeah.
Very confident.
Yeah, they've personified.
There was a point towards the end, and I don't want to start talking about the end quite yet, but there was a point I was like, I know they created, there is a language for the White Walkers and the others, and they created it, and they were going to use it on the show, and David Patterson is the guy who did all the languages, and I thought, are we going to actually hear him talk?
Yeah.
Are we going to hear
I
him
was
turn to
thinking that
John
the
and be
whole
like,
time.
like, I don't know.
So speak in English.
What if they got him in Gilbert Godfrey to do the voice?
But that's to your point, Lon, is I thought this more than we've seen before. And Hard Home, the come at me bro moment
and he did
did again, but it was at another level. So I thought there's something more here. And we might get it. We'll talk about that. Yeah.
They might just be dropping breadcrumbs for we'll get into this in another series.
Sure, I could see that
but
as well.
I don't know. It felt like
to me, I'll
he's
tell you,
got a personality.
it seems pretty final. We'll see if we can even have time to deal with it. But I also think this episode, and Rachel, I'll lean on you here a little bit on the book side of things, where there's a lot of prophecies, and we're very steeped in our prophecies, and we know them, and as fans, we're like, but I have my theory on Azor Ahai. This episode may have, and I don't know how they came up with this ending specifically to this battle, and how much George R.R. Martin said, we don't know yet. George will blog, and we'll see. The prince that was promised, Azor Ahai, still on the table for me, but I don't think the answer came this week.
No, I mean, I have to say it didn't, because I don't. Okay, well, I'm too would jump ahead. This is what we do, though.
Let's do it.
Arya takes out the Night King. A thing that I didn't know how much I wanted until it happened, and then I was like, yes, all about it. Especially because I think she has a great arc within this episode. And we can get into that. But in terms of the prince who was promised, or the princess who was promised, John and Dany played roles, but it's interesting that they didn't play the focal point roles that I think everybody expected them to. And that in and of itself is the Game of Thrones way. It's the way of upending expectations. And I don't necessarily mind it, but it does sort of make you wonder, what did Prince of Promise, what did Azor Ahai, what did any of it actually mean if it wasn't a direct confrontation with the Night King, with the Great Other, with this, elemental power that is trying to destroy humanity? John didn't get to have that moment, and neither did Dany. So it's, is the prophecy not as much about this confrontation with the Night King as we thought, and more about what's actually going on with the Game of Thrones? We have 3 more episodes, so I think time will tell. But in this episode, it's a kind of a question mark for me, because they didn't actually do anything.
Yeah. This might be a matter of show versus book, and George will tell his stories, and he's erasing things right now in his home in New Mexico, or if some of this came from it, because it's possible, Andres, that the last war, the war that's coming, might be more to do with the prophecy, and maybe Cersei is the great evil in a lot of this.
but I can also make an argument, a good argument, that Arya was the prince who was promised.
There you go.
And that Melisandre
there
literally
too.
told her, what do we say to the God of Death? Not today. Hey, girl, I know what you're going to do. This is something I've seen, and I've seen you close Blue Eyes, and she really emphasized Blue Eyes as implying that,
Go
hey,
get him.
Arya, this is your purpose. Yeah. You are the prince who was promised. I saw this coming. Bran saw it coming, and that's why you have a Valyrian steel dagger. Like, I could make that argument and say, yeah, this is who Melisandre really made it a point to interact with Arya.
I'm listening to that argument.
I read the line when she says, I saw you close many eyes, green eyes, blue eyes. That she was saying it wasn't that she predicted that Arya is going to be a murderer. It was that she predicted that Arya is going to be a faceless man. She closes her eyes and they're all different colors because she can change her.
But even Arya said,
face
you were
and
right.
appearance.
I did close a lot of eyes.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, she's pointing out that her level of prophecy was beyond what we had thought. We thought she was just predicting, like, you're going to be a badass murderer one day, and we're like, yeah. But no. I think there were hints in this episode that not just Melisandre, that a lot of these characters who have been priming and coaching and mentoring Arya, maybe there was some common understanding of her coming importance, because we're sort of tying them all together. There was always that theory that Syrio and Jaqen were the same guy, or that there was like, they're both from Bravo.
Syrio so alive. The shadow.
Yeah,
Look at the shadow.
Right, there was always that. And then, now we're bringing in Melisandre. There's a common thread. They're all from Essos.
Beric, too.
Yeah, they're all kind of like
angle.
vaguely religious figures. They're all kind of mysterious. They all represent these like various, and they all sort of somehow understand that this girl is going to be important.
Yeah.
I think in a way, no, I think
And
I
think that's
think you
connected,
guys are
yeah.
on the same page in a way, because what you're saying here, what Lon is saying, you're absolutely right. I took it in that moment. I got chills going back to the moment. What was that? Season 3?
Yeah.
Season 3 that she says this,
Sure.
and the green eyes, and blue eyes.
She
I
really
told you,
emphasized that
like
this
is, and it's
episode.
like, oh, exactly. We're all as fans sometimes looking at Arya was looking at. I'm going to get my list. I got my list. I'm going to
you're
kill
gonna
everybody.
Close the eyes of people that you murdered. It's like close your eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not just that, but the fact that the faceless assassin training that a lot of people complained about is kind of what beat the Nine King. Like, what beat the Nine King is ninjutsu. Essentially, like, being really good at
100%.
sneaking up on people is what beat the Night
Wait,
King.
so when did she sneak up on John?
I was going to say that to
Yes.
call back to the first episode of
the
the
first
season.
episode.
Yeah, they set that up.
Yeah.
They
At
totally
the-
set it up.
at the same spot.
Yeah, right. It's that same spot. Oh,
Which
you snuck up on me.
has now been revealed by Dan and Dave as the spot where the Night King was created.
But also
Yeah.
the same spot that Bran gave her that Valyrian steel dagger. Almost being like, Bran was like, I'm good, man. I know that I'm safe. Like, even like staring down the Night King and being like, you die today.
You died today.
Yeah.
You,
That's how I saw it. It's like Bran set that whole thing up as well.
We're on the same page, and now I'm even more excited about the possibility whether or not Arya is Azor Ahai. I don't want to get caught up in these prophecies. I don't.
All three of them were Azor
Yeah,
Ahai,
because
maybe.
George R. Martin is giggling in New Mexico going, I told you not to pay attention to prophecies because they're supposed to be wrong in his world. Or played around with.
Right. It's an oral
It's not the way you think it's going to
folk tradition. And we don't, they're getting this like eighth hand knowledge of all this stuff. I mean, their idea of what the long night was and what the prophecies and the stories that come out of it could be very different from what it had. They don't have first primary sources to go back to.
Yeah.
And so, I think that you don't want to get too caught up in the prophecies because they're all these people who wrote these prophecies were all human, and it's like a game of telephone.
And I'm actually excited at the prospect of digging into Melisandre. Got it wrong. Came back. I got it kind of right with John, but maybe kind of wrong. And now she's like, I got another vote.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
At first, I was like, that's why Beric came back so many times? That was pointless. And then obviously at the end of the episode, I was like, oh, he saved Arya.
Oh, yeah.
That was his whole purpose. He came back 6 times just to save the prince who was to save the chosen one. That's kind of what he did. He saved Arya.
Same with the Hound. He saw the vision in the fire because he had to be
and
there.
I was like, they saved Arya, and Arya's the one who beat the Night King. That's totally connected.
Going back to their conversation in episode 2, Hound, Beric, and Arya, and him Richard Dormer and his wonderful voice, the Lord of Light will have his here for a reason, it's his night. Yeah, and that final moment. And it plays out, we don't need to go too deep into the books, Rachel, here, but Beric is gone in the books long before this. But I think what he did in the books is similar to what he did now. And I think it's a sacrifice for a Stark.
Yeah.
And I love that they use Beric in that way. I love the shot of him almost Christ-like. It's not intended to be Christ-like, but of holding his arms, and I will not move until that girl is safe.
And that was a specific callback I felt in some ways to Hodor, which is the same.
Yeah.
It's like throwing yourself in front as a barrier to allow the Stark, the important young Stark, to escape.
By the way, I'm actually happy we didn't see Hodor marching on Winterfell.
That's a long way. That's a long march. I will say, we've been talking so much about the idea of seeing beloved living characters come back, and we
didn't
just
capitalize
we
on it.
just tease it in this. You see Lyanna and Ed open their eyes, but that's it.
Did you want more, Rachel? You want it with Dolorous Ed zombie killing people? What do you want?
It feels like, I don't want to say a wasted opportunity, but like to have Ed the zombie, come into Winterfell and to have Sam see him. You don't have to fight. He doesn't have to do one-on-one or whatnot. But there would be
kill him?
like
You want Sam to kill zombie Ed?
There was potential for those kinds of matchups, but in an episode that had so much going on and you still get plenty of emotional character beats, it's not like I can pick something. This shouldn't have happened, so that could have happened. That's not what I'm saying.
It's just kind of a tease. I mean, in the same way, they like messing with your expectations.
Of course.
Sure.
When Viserion is raining ice fire on Dany and her dragon, I think that's a little bit of a tease too. They want you to think, is she gonna turn into the Night Queen? Like, I think they wanted you to sort of go down that road before you realize, no.
Yeah.
Can I say too, one of the best moments of the episode, and a very pivotal moment, and it also goes back to subverting expectations, is the scene where Jon is charging at the Night King, and the Night King, pulls the same thing again, raises the dead before he can get to him, which I thought was so cool. I loved it. I was screaming at Jon, obviously, to win, but at the same time, the oneer where it's following Jon, and Jon is trying to get to the Night King, and he sees everyone around. Like, when he sees Sam basically
dying,
telling him with his eyes, like, help me, and Jon's like, sorry, man, I love you.
Gotta go.
Like, and he sees, like, everyone dying around him, but he keeps charging towards the night. I thought that was incredible.
I really love that moment. I love where it ends up with Arya getting the big win there. But not that Jon didn't do anything. And I think Jon and Dany were valuable. Dany had an emotional fumble that I'm saying that in the sense of I totally understand it, and I thought it was a good thing, a good character moment. She, watching the Dothraki, and that kind of sets a chain of events that kind of turns the tide of the battle. I think they were good. They were good. The ass kickings were happening, regardless if Dany sticks to the plan or not. The dragon on dragon battles. I mean, I really loved it. I love the imagery. I love the way they go above the clouds in the sky. Having just read Fire and Blood recently, and you get a lot of dragon on dragon violence. I was happy in a weird way. Happy meaning like I was clutching Grace's arm going, please don't die, Drogon.
Yeah. Is it the Sunfire versus Vhagar fight?
Yes.
In Fire and Blood, which when they flew above the clouds and they lost sight of Viserion, I'm like, he's dropping down. He's dropping down. They're not going to see him coming. I know this is pulled from this other dragon fight, which I thought was the nice, just very little book touch.
Yeah.
But it was flawless in terms of the CG and the way that the dragons tangled together, and you were getting a sense of, Viserion trying to snap at Jon, and Rhaegal biting Viserion's neck, and that scratched his chest, and like it's so visceral, and you just head over tail and the whole thing, and you see the Night King going for the spear, and you're like, he's going for Jon, and it was spectacularly done, and a nice juxtaposition to all of the horror, blood and guts and mud and everything on the ground to have something almost as beautiful as that up in the air.
Yeah, this battle changes tones a lot, and Lon, you talked about horror. This turns into straight up a horror movie at some point, and I'm thinking specifically of Arya in the library.
Oh yeah, I mean with that scene, it's got a lot of horror zombie movie elements. It also reminded me oddly of the Jurassic Park kitchen scene. Where
That's in my notes.
Are crawling around, and which is, I mean, that's a high compliment because what Spielberg does so well in that is that you perfectly understand where the villains are. You're never confused about what Ari is hiding from. You know where the zombie is that she's got to stay out. And just like how Spielberg sort of lays out that scene so that the tension just builds perfectly because you know where the raptors are and how they have to stay out of the line of sight. I loved it. Brilliant sequence. And there was a lot of that in this episode. I mean, I feel like they definitely went in with this is, a medieval set horror film where it's a castle, but a zombie invasion in a castle.
I love that quiet moment, Rachel.
Yeah, it's beautiful because of, again, it comes back to what Ace was talking about in the Sapochnik's direction. There was the right amount of chaos, crazy zombies. I was getting World War Z vibes with the way that the zombies would pile on each other to get over the wall, and the way they moved. It was like a wave of they really doubled down on that aspect of the horror, and then cut to these quiet, they haven't quite broken all the way through into the rooms and the halls of the castle yet. So people are trying to find a reprieve in there, and you have a moment, but there's just thousands of them, and they're making their way in there, and the idea of what they react to and what they don't react to, and the dripping of her blood, and you just sit on it long enough to be like, oh God. And then, the oldest trick in the book, but it works every time. Throw the book, make a noise, run out the door.
You got to do that.
You got to, absolutely. But it was the right kind of homage to those kinds of horror tropes while still having you sit on the edge of your seat. Yeah. And can I just say, Maisie Williams kicking butt in the her face. It's the stuff from the trailer, but it was so great to see it play out in this battle where she has the incredible fight scene that Davos is just staring wide-eyed at. Did she just take out a dozen whites without even thinking? But then she gets overwhelmed too. All of our best fighters get overwhelmed because these are an overwhelming force. And she said she wanted to see this face of death, and she's seeing it. She has that moment where she gets knocked backwards, and they're all trying to fight to come out the door at her. And she's looking at it, and you see the fear come onto her face. And that's when she runs outside, and that's when Barrick, gets the Hound to get back into action because he's pretty much given up. And it's
the Hound needs some therapy.
He does. Well, we all know how he feels about fire, and so that certainly isn't helping. And this is a unwinnable situation, and he understands that. He's the realist. He's always been a realist, so he's looking at the situation, going, "What's the point in continuing to fight?" And Barrick goes, "She's the point." And Barrick's saying it because he knows the things that we don't know yet, and that his purpose is to protect her, and he also realized that is also the Hound's purpose. Yeah. So they, that springs the Hound into action, and then you have their great hallway scene, which we've touched upon, and but her arc and all of that and the way that she played it was just great.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, that's directly paralleling the Hound at Blackwater, which is another battle where he gets freaked out by the chaos and then fire, except in that one, there isn't a barrack around to be like, no, you have to stay. So he just says, fuck the king, and then leaves. He
heads on out and grabs it. Yeah.
So I think that what we're seeing here is his growth and change as a character. This time he doesn't run away.
He doesn't run away. Yeah, I take a little shot at him almost at a left because I love the Hound. I think it's you said a realistic point of view, Rachel. If I go to Saving Private Ryan, I remember when Corporal Upham has his problems and he's afraid, and it's like I worked with some guys who were making fun of the character and how Stu, I'd be tougher than that. And it's like maybe you would have, but I love this perspective of. It breaks Corporal Upham's mind a little bit. And I love that the Hound, I feel sorry for the Hound, but I love that his mind, even when Thoros dies, and that moment where he's just watching the bear devour Thoros and he can't do anything. He is the big, tough Sandor Clegane, and that might not be his heart, and he might just be overwhelmed, and realistic is a good sense of what's the point. Andres, I do want to go back a little bit, the big retreat and the moment that I'll tell you what I was convinced Grey Worm was going out at this moment. The hold the retreat line. Yep. When he says, it was the first moment where I started to get a little teary-eyed because I thought he was going. Hold the retreat. And what a heroic moment that Fortunately, he survives, knocking on wood for the rest of the show.
Yes.
But I love that moment.
Oh, it's incredible, and then we see how committed he is. I still think he's the biggest badass on the show, but that kind of comes back to he's the one who looked at Melisandre and was like, "We need fire. She can make fire. We need you, girl." And then he like brings out a part of his Unsullied to protect her.
The little phalanx that they surrounded her
it
with.
was so cool,
And it was awesome too because their first interaction when she arrives, she
That's
says
right.
Valar Morghulis, and he says Valar Dohaeris, and
Yeah.
that's the core
That's
of what he
great one
is.
is.
All
He's
men
all
must
men must serve,
serve,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's great, and that she recognizes that, and so she understood that he was the one to help her in that moment do a thing that needed to be done because Dany, as we spoke of before, that great blizzard can't light the trenches, and if they can't light the trenches, this is all going to go a lot faster than we expected.
Right.
Can I just say too, Lon called it last week, or it might have been the week before, but when you said like, Melisandre always wanted to be at a battle, and we were always wondering why. She's like, if I were there, you wouldn't have lost.
that's what
And
she
now
told
we
Stannis.
see why she's so clutch in this battle.
That's what you told Stannis after Blackwaters. If you hadn't left me behind, it could all worked out differently.
Yeah,
and then he
absolutely.
doesn't leave her behind when he goes to the last battle of Winterfell.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved all that stuff there, and it's starting to build up towards the chaotic end. And yeah, this is where, having only watched it one time so far, I am struggling to kind of get my footing on where to go because I couldn't breathe in these moments.
Can we go to your boy?
Yeah, let's go to
The
Jorah.
best. I think he was
Okay,
one of the
I'm
best.
ready. Can you hold my hand while we
The
talk?
fact that he went out, like when he got stabbed all those times, and I thought he was going to have the whole death scene, but he stood up again. Like when he got up, I was like, Jorah, come on, man, this guy's so cool.
And it was beautiful, right?
It was
because you got a cue because Dany's flying on Drogon and they have the aerial fight, but she's still around. Jon is focused on Bran, but she's focused on her people, and that's why she reacts the way she does when the Dothraki are destroyed, and she jumps on Drogon and she gets involved in the Unsullied, and Jorah has loved her since day one. So at a certain point in the thick of the chaos, and he's in the courtyard at Winterfell, he hears Drogon, and so he knows she's nearby, and so he looks up, and then flash forward, she's out there. She tries to take out the Night King. It doesn't work. Jon's knocked off Rhaegal. He's got to make his way to Winterfell. She says, go. And then, Night King brings everybody back. And now there's a whole new set of zombies. And she's getting overrun. Drogon getting overrun. That gave me the creepy crawlies.
Oh, no,
the way that shot looked.
Oh,
And her falling off. So now she's alone out there. But in my mind, ever since like Jorah looked up because he heard Drogon and knew that she was like maybe kind of nearby, he'd been making his way toward her.
Yeah.
And so that rescue at the last moment, just that worked for me in 100 different ways because it's Jorah, because it's Dany, because he would be tracking her as much as he possibly could during this battle, and for them to be fighting. Like we got the Bran Jaime shot of them fighting back to back. We got a Jorah Dany doing the
that was
same
great.
thing. And I loved that idea. And I loved that if this is how Jorah was if Jorah had to die, this is how he was going to go out. And they treated it with such respect and love and reverence, and her crying over him meant me crying on the couch and the whole 9 yards.
And Drogon coming up and doing the it's okay, mom pet thing got me. I don't know if Taco does that to you, Lon, when you cry, but no.
Kind of just looks at you.
Kind of looks at you. Just look, Jorah's been my guy. Love Stannis, love Jon Snow, love Davos, love all those old crusty guys. I miss Mance Rayder, but Jorah's been my guy for a lot of reasons in my life over time. Not all of them good, and this was that moment. This was a little bit reminds me of Steve Waddington's captain character in Last Mohicans and Burning in the Fire for Cora Monroe to go on.
Both of our big deaths were redemptive.
Yes.
It was Theon and Jorah.
Very much
two
so.
guys that had violated a lot of Westerosi customs and principles.
Done
had
things that
been
pretty despicable.
disappointed to their families, and then had an opportunity during this battle to serve.
This now makes the first scene that they meet even more powerful for me. A lot of this stuff does, and this is the joy of seeing any story kind of completed over time. You can go back to some of the beginning, go back to season 1 and watch Kat and Ned say goodbye for the last time. They don't know it's the last time. Scenes start having more value and more power, and Jorah standing before Dany at the first time at their wedding is gonna kill me now when I watch it.
Yeah, I mean, can I say Theon? Theon really blew me away this episode when he was going just ham and taking out white after white after white. And we see the Night King coming with his generals, and Bran gives him that line. He's like, Theon, you're a good man. Like, bro, you're a good dude, man. Like, when he says that to him, it's like, that's such a good way to go for Theon. Yeah. And the fact that he was MVP for me for a while. I was like, Theon is holding it down, and the way he goes out is just perfect.
I love it because Bran knows.
That seems to be pretty clear at this point.
He knows, and he knows that Theon has stood by him, protected him, and come full circle, and is going to die. Yeah. And that is a tough moment in a good way. And an ending, I was more emotionally invested in Theon's ending than I thought I would.
Same here.
Lon, are you okay with Theon?
It's really interesting because Bran, that line is very interesting because Bran doesn't say things to comfort people. It's true. Just for their own sake. It's not like Theon's going to die. I'm going to say something nice to him.
Yeah.
So you got to wonder, like, what was the motivation there? Was it like I need this guy to stay with it for another few minutes? I'm going to encourage him. Like, I thought that was a sort of an interesting beat for Bran suddenly to warm up and be like, oh, I should be nice. He's about to die for me.
Yeah.
Because before he was like, oh, yeah, I don't need you anymore. You can get the hell out of here, Mira Reed, who saved me.
I'm so salty about that. I love
I can't imagine Mira survived. Good we didn't see that,
That's true.
Well, Bran had the parallel that I noticed was Bran and Theon had a conversation before the fight got to them in the Godswood, and it mirrored the conversation Bran had with Jaime last week. And it's the line from the trailer, everything you did brought you to where you are now, where you belong, home. And I think Bran has been the voice of, everybody, including the people who have done things they're not proud of or that they're pretty despicable or awful or made mistakes or whatever, made you the person you are, brought you to this point at this time in this way, which is important to the greater fight, the greater story being told. And, to forgive and understand, and everything is wrapped up in that moment. And that's something that Theon needed to hear. And he needed to hear, like he needed to hear from Jon 2 seasons ago, like, what are you waiting here for? Go find your sister, or at the end of last season, excuse me. And then something similar here. And then I think that Bran Stark's still in there to some extent.
I think so too. He responds to the name.
He right. Yeah. I think that he's been maybe unnecessarily cold in some instances, and definitely very, very sort of like standoffish. And so it's hard to know, like, are all emotion gone? But in this moment, it being Theon, somebody he's known since he was born, who did all the things that he did, but has also come back from that, saying you're a good man to him does not cost Bran anything, really. And Alfie Allen, who I think is my favorite actor on the show, to be honest with you, I think that he's just stupendous. The look, it's almost like you see his shoulders straighten just a little bit. It's like that he could breathe again. He had found the redemption that he never really truly believed he could find, and that gave him the courage to turn around and charge at the Night King. And it was the moment I really wanted for Theon, and I thought was absolutely beautiful. And yes, there's a few people on Twitter wondering if he's still alive because he was still twitching at the end, and they kept looking at it. And I'm like, I highly doubt it, because this is too good of an ending that just has come full circle in a way. But at the same time, too, if Theon could make it all the way to the end, I wouldn't be unhappy about that.
Well, someone asked me today, a friend of mine was like, going to the episode, they're like, who do you think's going to die? And, and we go through the list, and I said, I don't think Brienne. And they really, and it wasn't challenging. It was really interesting. And there's a good reason I thought, Brienne's story kind of ended with the knighting, in a way. We don't know what's yet to come. But there's just something to be said about George, who is at the center of this all, no matter what Dan and Dave and his team and their team does, George likes to reward a lot of those folks. Theon, to me, was a person who could have been rewarded.
I still think he could make it in the books, to be honest.
Yeah, in the books, yeah. But in the show, this was
made sense.
Defending Winterfell, defending Bran after what he did. There's a cost. There's this idea we hear a lot about in Star Wars about the redemption of Kylo Ren. But what he did, no one's saying forget. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you forgive, you don't forget, and there's a cost to it. And I think Theon was a great example of that. We're going to take a break a little bit here, but I do think there's
Crypts.
some...
We haven't talked about
I want to go to
crypts.
the crypts, and then when we come back, I think we'll focus on the end, and then maybe look ahead. But the crypts, I got to admit, I was wrong. I know a lot of people were predicting that the crypts would come alive, and I thought... I may have half-heartedly, I should say, agreed, and haphazardly. I just didn't think it was going to happen. I just thought it was too almost dead Stark's coming back, but Lon, we got a pretty damn good moment when that hand comes out.
Yeah, we got some dead Stark creepiness. I mean, the thing I liked the best about the crypt stuff was Sansa and Tyrion together.
Oh yeah,
that kind of rekindling their old friendship and that relationship, and the two of them sort of down the stretch. I definitely thought they were goners. Like I thought when you had that shot of them cowering behind the statue, I thought, oh wow, they're about to take both of these two. They kind of hold hands, and it's like a little. It wouldn't have worked out between us.
I honestly thought like Lyanna Stark was going to kill him for 2 seconds.
It was. I thought they were going to see I thought that was a really nice moment.
The feather move, and all of a sudden, boom.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a little. Again, that was a case where you would just think more people would die. It just seems like even though the dead came alive in these crypts, this tiny little area, didn't really seem like too many. Like Gilly and Sam were my question. Do we confirm that they're alive?
Yeah, I think we see Gilly, right?
Felt like we did.
I think we see Gilly. I know Varys is.
Missandei.
Yeah, definitely we confirmed that Varys and Missandei are alive along with Tyrion and Sansa. That's impressive. You can stay alive in a crypt filled with living dead bodies that's sealed off.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this from a fan's perspective. I like that there isn't as many deaths. I'm not saying that anyone here is obsessed with the death of characters, but I got it a little bit in season 7 going north of the wall. Here now, I kind of want a little bit of joy to cling on to for a little bit. Yeah. But I think we should give some points for surviving, Andres.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the opposite side of that, Ken, and I know you know that I am. I don't care. I mean, I was like, kill them all. As long as Grey Worm doesn't die, and as long as Jaime doesn't die, I'm like, I want to see more people die. That's just me personally.
You're a dark soul.
Yeah, except Ghost, and I know we haven't gotten to him yet, but
we don't have any
fingers
confirmation
crossed,
one way or the other.
I will be pissed if they kill Ghost. But either way, yeah, the crypt scene, it was great. Speaking of horror, that was another great horror scene.
A literal horror moment.
Yeah, very Sam Raimi almost.
Very Sam Raimi. That's good.
Arms reaching out of the coffins.
I think as it refers to Ghosts, as you can refer to Ghosts there, I think, budget aside, because they spent a lot of money, I know there's a lot of the reasons Ghost isn't around, but I think they love a good death, and a Ghost death would have been good in that way of let's destroy some hearts. I think Ghost is still around. Yeah. I don't know. Rachel?
A Ghost is a survivor, so he's direwolf. Like, it was in that first charge, so my heart stopped for a moment. But I was like,
get it from a strategy point of view.
Right? It's a smart move.
Put
him
in your brand.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Seriously, anyway, okay. Hindsight's 2020. Yeah. The crypt stuff was. So it turned out, the fans were smart enough for the most part to understand that, like, bad plan, guys. This guy can raise the dead. There's a lot of dead bodies down there. It's all about, I don't know how much time they were down there for. I also will buy into theories of, like, those were pretty emaciated skeletons for the most part. So how much damage are they going to do? Again, they're not the smartest creatures, so hiding does appear to work for us. I think the crypts are supposed to be fairly large, so people surviving that situation, I'm willing to, sort of let that go, because I'm assuming, again, that most of these characters have something to do moving forward. And it's a thing that, not that I haven't thought of this before, but in this particular literal term, the books together are called A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
The show is called The Game of Thrones. Yeah. And it's based on the first book, because that's what it's called. But I think the show has long embraced, and I might have fought that for a while, the grounded political personal, character-driven stories trump the magic and the dragons and the religions and the power and the extra part of the fantasy. And I think this season is proof in the pudding. We already killed the Night King, which I know we can get into a little bit more about what we think that means.
Right.
But I think that the characters that survive today are meant to, because they are still playing the Game of Thrones, which is going to continue to play out over the next 3 episodes. Right. So therefore, the most interesting part of the crypts is like Lon said, Tyrion and Sansa managed to have pretty much the only reference to, the other thing at play here, which is Dany going for the Iron Throne. And she's like, you were the best of my husbands. He's like, geez, that's not saying a lot. But, that we would never work out between us because your queen would get in our way. And Missandei gets kind of snarky about it. So that tension is still there. Yeah. And that is going to be confronted later on. But I find it very interesting that Sansa pointedly says to Tyrion, your loyalties would be divided if you felt any loyalty to me when you also, as the hand of the queen, feel any loyalty to Dany. So those lines and those divides still exist and will be played out over the next 3 episodes. But I just loved the callback for that relationship. The witty remarks won't help anybody in this situation. And I loved her line about the bravest thing we can do right now is be honest. And the honest thing is we have no place up in that battle right now. Yeah. And know yourself.
I like that moment.
Is there any possibility that that's foreshadowing an actual Sansa Tyrion? Because I was thinking about it when they were talking about it. That is a reasonable way you could sort of close the loop on the political troubles in Westeros right now. Yeah, because a Lannister Stark union would be like, now there's no more question about who is the next in line for the throne.
Tywin's a smart guy.
And it goes back to Starks and Lannisters fighting in the streets in season 1.
Yeah, like if we got Cersei out of there,
and it gives a nod to Tywin, which I'm a fan of.
Yeah, if you get Cersei out of there, Jaime is in the Kingsguard, Lord of Casterly Rock. Tyrion becomes the Lannister heir, marries Sansa, the Warden of the North.
It's interesting.
It's a workable ending, which would bring peace. Not that those two characters are like in love, but they like each other, mutual respect. But I was thinking that is a potential end game. No,
right. No, I think that's as we look forward to going forward, the last 3 episodes, that's an interesting possibility. The final end before we take a break, we get the Arya moment, the big win. Let's really talk about it here for a couple minutes. I loved it. And I didn't think I would. If you had told me before, I wouldn't have been like, no, not Arya. But I'm like, oh, okay, I thought this was Jon or Dany's moment. It worked on a lot of levels. A lot of what we've already talked about with Arya, the training that you talked about, Andres, the training that everyone was like, boring, saved her and may have led to the victory. I really liked this final moment. Go to the actual kill point.
Yeah, I mean, when she popped out of nowhere, the first thing I said was, where did she come from? Which, I mean, obviously I can forgive because of her ninjutsu training, which I keep saying. But yeah, the scene when he grabs her neck, I thought it would have been even nuttier if he just went and snapped her neck. I was like, that would have been bold, and then we all die and everyone loses. But
the world according to
her
Ace.
dropping that knife and a callback to when she fought against Brienne, and even just the sparring match with Brienne was great. And it's as someone who's a fan of Spartacus, the only fan of Spartacus, it's a great moment in Spartacus as well, where the whole drop the knife, drop the sword kind of situation comes into play, and Rey does it in The Last Jedi,
my head went
which I'm a fan
to The Last
of.
Jedi.
So I dug it, I really did, but immediately my thoughts were going to like, does that mean she's Azor Ahai? Which we can get into later on.
We discussed this a little bit. Lon, the kill moment. You like it? Where you at with it?
Yeah, I called it. Remember, I was like, Arya's gonna sneak in, and she's the one who's gonna try to sneak up and get at the Night King. I mean, it was a cool character moment. Like, that's a cool character to have be the one who sort of steps up and it's such a fantasy trope, but it works. It's not the character. It's not it's never the Aragorn, it's never the the toughest, the badass, the ultimate warrior. That you always need the person you wouldn't suspect, the smaller person, the out of the way person, the person who other people always look down on. And that's been, Arya's journey.
She's part of that too.
She's this little girl. She's unassuming. She's small. Other characters never really think that she's going to be able to handle herself. And then here she is. So, it's a really nice payoff moment there. It was very surprising. I don't think any of us saw it. And nice symmetry of it being with the Valyrian steel dagger that's been in place since season 1. It started the War of the Five Kings.
Shout out to Littlefinger.
And take me back to that moment in season 1. That's where I want to go now. I want to watch that moment with Ned Stark telling her, "You're going to marry a lord and be a lady. That's not me." No, she's here to save the world. And I love that, Rachel.
Yeah, and I have to once again shout out to Sapochnik, because we'd gotten to a point once the Night King raised the next wave of the dead. Like, I turned to my boyfriend, I'm like, there's no getting out of this except by killing the Night King. Like, there's no other, none of the generals got involved. They all stayed in the periphery for the most part until they kind of came in.
They get cocky, those generals.
Yeah. And it was just, it kept going, and everybody was falling, and literally Brienne, Jaime, and Potter up against a wall. Sam's like almost under a pile of corpses. Like, it's just, we are at the end, and I actually thought they were gonna cliffhang us. I was like it's almost 80 minutes.
I did too.
I'm like, we're not gonna find out. Like, who? And what I did in my head, I'm like, who's still in play? Because it does not look like Jon's gonna get there.
Yep.
And it was either Theon is a fake out in his death, and he's going to come up, but I don't think that was the right person to do. And I was just, my head went back to the moment when, Arya says, "Not today," and charges out of the Great Hall. That's the last we saw of her. Right. And I was just thinking, like, how, unless we cut to black and we don't know what happens, that's the only thing that possibly happened. So, like, when the other White Walker general, like, tilts his head, I'm like, waiting. And then the way she just comes flying through the air, I was just like, I'm for this. I literally threw my hands up and went, this is amazing. And then, the turn and knife, neck grab. But when she dropped the knife, Star Wars was the first thing that stopped in my head. And I'm like, badass female defeating there. Another one right here. Everything about this I'm so on board for. Yeah. And the fact that it was the dagger is the tipping point of full circle in this moment. And the fake out of it not being Jon and it's not Dragonfire with Dany and Drogon, that it's Arya is a great thing that I don't think too many people saw coming, yet still very much fits.
Yeah.
My one concern now is that I feel like we don't have a happy ending coming for Arya now after this. Like, again, going back to the fantasy trope, Frodo can't just go back to the Shire. Like, he after the completion of a journey like this, he's got to go into the West, Like, I think we're gonna have some kind of, and I don't see Arya being able to go back to being.
I 100%
Arya
agree.
Stark.
100% agree with you. And you go back to, what is it, season 6? What is West of West? Arya asks that question.
Yeah,
but what is West of West? Yeah, and I think you're right.
I don't think she's part of the future of, like, Winterfell or Westeros.
Pack her bags. Maybe, but she also is pretty loyal to family, but we'll see. We're going to take a quick break. We got a question coming in from longtime listener Eric Monroe, and we're going to talk about what's going on with the rest of the show, because we still have 3 more episodes. Casterly Talk will be right back after this.
Ken, I have one more thought I wanted to ask you. So if this is like the end of the Night King, which it looks like, are you okay with not finding out any more info about, his motivations and all of, like, any kind of backstory with him? Are you okay with it just being the way it was?
Welcome back to Casterly Talk, and that was Eric Monroe, a longtime listener of not just this show, but Daily Thrones. They used to be on the same feed, and he used to have great thoughts and questions. And so glad that Eric called in using the Anchor app to ask us about the Night King. So as we come back to this episode and finish up here, and get us all home to watch it again, let's talk about going forward. The Night King dead. Is he dead completely? Is Bran the Night King? Is there a big surprise coming? Is Cersei the big evil, both literally and maybe in a bigger figurative sense, and some prophecy behind that? We have a lot to decide, and is this all for the throne, or is there something left that we want? So I'll just start directly going around the table here. I'll start with you, Lon. You've already said you want more, would like more, and feel it would be disappointment if we don't get more about the Night King.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've kind of left it we've left a lot of the biggest questions unanswered. And just like I was saying before, up until this season, or maybe last season, up until pretty recently, if you had said the Night King is just a personification of winter, a personification of death and decay, a personification of the cycle of death and renewal, I would have been like, sure, I buy it.
Sure.
But they've taken great pains over the last few seasons to say no, that not only did he used to be a man, but he is still like a human. He's got emotions. He's got a personality. He's capable of irony. He's capable of being strategic during a battle. I mean, that's really what we saw this week is he's like a general. He's making decisions. He's directing his troops. Right. And all of those speak to him being conscious, sentient, thoughtful, and we don't really have a good grasp on why, and if so, what he wanted, and even what would have happened if he killed Bran. I mean, to me, that's the biggest question that's not answered. Is he was about to lay that killing blow? What is that his version of what happened to him as humanity? Like, would all the humans have dropped dead?
Because, yeah, that's a great point, because he takes out Max von Sydow, but Max von Sydow has already dumped the files into Bran's brain. So we don't know. Does it all blink out in some kind of weird existence?
You mentioned that specifically. We saw Max von Sydow sort of disappears in an instant. Yeah. And you know, is that what would have happened to Bran? I mean, I think that's really such a pressing question that I really want some kind of answer to that. I really hope the show is not planning to like dust off its hands and be like, well, that's it. White Walkers are done. Let's focus 100% on this fight for King's Landing.
And look, I think we always thought this battle would come here, but maybe the idea of it's a defeat. They barely escape through the crypts, and then the Night King still marches towards King's Landing was in my brain as something I not only as possibility, but maybe even wanted. And Rachel, I know you're talking about winter. Winter is here, but it hasn't hit the other folks down in other parts of the country, Westeros, as much as it's hit the north.
Yeah, it's something that I've stated in some of our prediction episodes and I've talked about is the idea that, I mean, the dead are coming. The Night King and his army of the dead are coming to bring a long night, are coming to blot out the sun, are coming to, to change the world. And it was meant to scare the world. And I want the world to understand that they were on the brink of, utter destruction at the hand and the force of the dead, the army of the dead. And for it to all end in the north means that the world wasn't affected by this possibly world-ending apocalyptic thing. And, for the whole series to start with a prologue of the White Walkers in the north with Waymar Royce and Will and Garrett and everything, it felt like that's what we were building to. But then the series did what it did, and it landed in this other area that was much more grounded. It was about the politics, about the characters, about the Game of Thrones, like I mentioned earlier. So I understand that's what attracted a lot of non-fantasy viewers to the show, and that's what grounds the show. So it's vitally important, and I don't mind that that there is we have a sort of culmination to the magical fantasy elements to a certain extent in this episode, but I hope it's not fully dropped. I hope that there's some exploration of Bran in terms of what he knows, what being the three-eyed raven means moving forward. He has had visions about dragons flying over King's Landing, so his magical powers are still there. We have one, possibly two dragons still in play. I honestly thought that there would be no dragons at by the time this battle happened. So that's a fun, upended prediction for me. So there are elements that will still bring the fantasy to King's Landing, but I hope that they find a way within the context of the show to let the world know what almost happened. And hopefully maybe that gains Danny and John some positive reviews by the people of the Seven
Some
Kingdoms.
good Yelp reviews
You
down
know,
below.
you
Okay.
guys saved us from the army of the dead. Part of me believes that in this world, though, people won't believe it. They're like, that's just Snarks and Grumpkins. That's not anything like that. Didn't affect us. Snow barely got to King's Landing. I would have loved to see a blizzard on King's Landing. I wanted to see the fight brought there, but it's not the decisions that they made. So I'm very curious to see what decisions they did make over the next 3 episodes. I just hope that the fantasy elements aren't, wipe our hands. We've done this, and we're moving on.
I can't imagine that. I'll just say, yet. Everything is yet. We haven't seen yet. No, I know that you're saying, but for those listening who might have those same questions, we got to give it going here.
I mean,
a little bit.
Bran and Sam are both alive, presumably.
Right.
And Sam touch and go, but I feel like they would have let us know if he had. And so I think those are the 2 characters that will still be. They have unfinished business with this sort of storyline. Like Sam. Presumably will go back to the Citadel or let other maesters know what he's seen and experienced. I think that may be one way that the world starts to find out about what happened. And then Bran, what does the Three-Eyed Raven do now that this immediate threat is over? I think, again, he's not just going to go back to being Bran Stark at Winterfell. He's on some new journey. I think that's probably how we'll dig in a little deeper to
just
some
leave him at the tree for the rest of the show.
Just, like he's like the Walmart greeter of Winterfell. Like, welcome, I'm not Bran Stark. This is Winterfell.
That would be
Ace.
bad.
Night King, you want more?
100%. I mean, more explanation at least. I know a lot of people hate exposition, and that's like a big no-no, but I low-key love exposition, and that's a lot what we get in anime, and I know I always bring up anime, but I do think we're going to get hopefully a scene or a moment next week with Bran just kind of giving us the cliff notes of what happened, what is the Night King, what did he want, what Bran's purpose is going forward, what this all means, because I think we do need some closure. You mentioned when we were off air that we began with the White Walkers. So we at least need some sort of explanation to tell us what exactly was going on and what happens now. Now that we have no Night King or no White Walkers, and I think we'll get that next episode. But I still kind of like the idea that the Night King wasn't the big bad of the season, that it's Cersei, and that politics, like you said, Rachel, is coming back. And now that we always thought it was going to be this epic fantasy magical world, but then again, we go back to the political element of Game of Thrones.
I like it too. I want some more answers about the Night King? Yeah, I do. Just like I want some more answers about Snoke, but I don't need Snoke to be alive. Sure. I can get those answers about his past 100%. Elsewhere, talking some Star Wars. I think yet is the key. We're going to get some more, but I'm okay because I do think this is the direction George is going. I don't think you sit down with George in New Mexico 10 years ago and he goes, here's the ending. The ending is they destroy the Night King, and that's the end of the show. Cool. All right. Well, we're going to extend it past that. I don't think you do that because George himself, it's a bittersweet ending. I think this is part of the plan, which means there might be more, or if there isn't, that's part of George's plan in a way. But I think there might be more.
If we're saying, I think we're almost answering our own question in some way.
That's a good podcast.
If you're saying that Cersei is the big bad, like she's the ultimate villain,
right?
She's got to do something horrible. We haven't. I think we're almost at the point now where she's not done a very nice thing, like letting all the people in the North kind of go and be a buffer. Yeah. But it's also when you're talking about she wants to hold on to the throne, she's brought in the Golden Company, she's going to do what she can to protect her position. Well, that's really what Daenerys is doing also. Like, I don't necessarily see one of those quests as purely good and one of those quests as purely evil. Yeah. I think if they're going to establish Cersei is going to be defeating her as the big, rousing end of the show, we got to get rid of her. She's horrible. Right. She's going to have to do something terrible.
Burn them all. Burn them all.
That's what I was going to say.
I like that idea, though. I like that there's something more.
Because she has in the past, but to like the Tyrells and the High Sparrow, nothing that emotionally is going to hit viewers in that way.
Yeah. I'm geared up for something big and interesting. And there could be, I mentioned the Bran as the Night King theory never held water for me. But do you think there's anything more with Bran? Here?
Explain it to me. I never really got why Bran would turn into the Night King.
It's the idea that Bran is every Bran, like the fact that his consciousness could travel. Well, they thought it would travel into that original figure.
Yeah.
And that's
but then why
made
would
those
he,
decisions?
But then why would he be the Night King? Like why if Bran Stark warged into that guy, why would he want to kill everybody?
That's also look. This is also
just solve that
very good
mystery.
question.
No, this
is
is
also-
the part that never makes
that's
sense
great,
to me.
yeah.
This is why I also don't enjoy time travel. That's another thing I won't talk about from a recent movie. I don't like it. I think it's cheap,
dude.
I love it. You're
don't-
talking to the
Spoilers.
biggest Prisoner of Azkaban fan.
Small doses.
I love time travel. But then again, I can argue, Ken, that they did that. They opened that door with the Dorne scene and with him warging into Hodor. There is time travel.
There is.
It's a thing.
Oh, I'm not arguing that it's not possible along the rules that they've established that Bran could have
It just
put
would be
his
kind of
consciousness in.
pointless.
Well, but usually a thing like that is there be some compelling reason for that character to do this thing.
That's where it falls down. For me.
yeah, I never seemed like what would be Bran's compelling reason to kill them all.
Him
Like,
whispering "burn them all" in the Mad King's ears is cool. I get it. That's neat. But why?
Right.
Why would be? And that can be revealed. It
just never felt like we were leading into anything.
And I
like
definitely
that.
don't like that one at all.
Yeah,
either.
that's what I mean when I say I don't like time travel. I love Back to the Future. I love time travel.
It also takes
I just-
away motivations because we have the Mad King and he's mad.
Yes.
Justifying his madness as like it was Bran. Like
I don't like it when I feel it makes a lot of things that I've invested time in meaninless.
Exactly.
And there'll be some meaningless stuff.
I didn't mean to
If
sidetrack.
No. But I brought it up because people still could there be something else? Does Bran, hey, this went according to my plan. We killed the Night King. That's good. He's out of the way. I don't know if he's good or bad. I don't know if that comes in any factor. And Bran's like, now I have the power.
I feel like there's got to be some way to wrap up.
Right.
What's he doing next? What is he now? What is his function? And I think that may also include some kind of explanation of who was the Night King, what was his function.
Because even though this now does become For the Throne a lot, at least the next 2 episodes, right? At least, I mean, we got this coming here. Cersei and Dany and Jon, and they're all fighting Sansa and Tyrion, and the idea of them coming together, all this kind of stuff. Bran's still there. So there's some reason, and there's maybe some reveal. He's not just going to be like, oh, I know who wins the throne. Bye-bye. Like, there's got to be something else.
All right, I'm going to go now.
Yeah. Actually, that was one of my little favorite funny moments of, I'm going to go. What? Wait.
Go where?
There's a fight. There's a fight. Grab a dagger.
Yeah.
Your hands work. Come on. There's still a lot left. And I love that there's a lot left. I love it. I think we always thought, I don't think anyone ever really thought this was going to be the final battle. And the directors lined up to this being, we knew some of the titles coming out for the episodes, that this was going to kind of be it. This was our version of Long Night. I do agree with you, Rachel, that I would have liked to seen a Night King battle down at King's Landing as well, but we're not done.
Exactly. No, there's 3 whole episodes, and they're supposed to be pretty long. And I'm very excited to see, a lot of players made it through this battle, which just adds to the anticipation of the coming confrontations that are going to happen. Not the least of which is where we left off with Dany and Jon and the entire revelation of who he is. And, there are plenty of very complicated, interesting, juicy stories left to tell between these characters. And I suspect that there will be another, set piece of some kind at King's Landing, because again, I know prophecies and visions, interpretations, and again, get thrown around, but we still have the visions from the House of the Undying and Bran's visions, and, the coming together of, we've got the Hound made it through, so Clegane Bowl is happening. I'm
excited for that.
And Jaime and Cersei and Tyrion are all still in place. So the
Bron's
got his hands
in
full.
the middle of all of this.
Bron's really got a lot of work ahead of him.
Yeah. He
Both
does.
of them
Both of them survived. So yeah, exactly.
He does. He does. a ton more to talk about, but not a lot to talk about. And I know we're all tired here too. And Lon, hell, you've still got to go produce another show tonight.
I got to go write some notes.
Write some notes here. Some final thoughts on what we saw here tonight, Andres.
I thought it was incredible. I thought, I mean, we barely touched on it, but even the cinematography of this episode is stunning. I told you that the scene where Bran wargs into the ravens and we see that one shot of the Night King reaching out and his eyes are glowing is absolutely incredible. The aerial fights we saw, and I know that's CGI, but it's still so well done and so well shot. Because that is still rendered and shot. I thought that's the biggest thing that stands out to me. Obviously, I'm still that guy who wanted to see more deaths, but I
love that about you.
I really do want to see
you're really a
lot.
nice, sweet guy.
Yeah, but I want to see people die.
You just love death.
Yes, I do. But at the same time, going forward, what's to come is such an interesting factor. I'm so curious. This is something that I'm spitballing in my brain right now, but I'll say it as like my closing thoughts. I'm curious if we're gonna get some sort of, if anyone has read the comic Civil War, Marvel Civil War, where it's Cap versus Iron Man.
A while ago, yeah.
But at the end, the finale of this whole thing has turned into Cap realizing that it doesn't matter who's right or wrong, and it doesn't matter if Cap's right and Iron Man's right, because the chaos that ensues and the amount of people that died in battle is the most important factor. And I think we're going to get something similar with Cersei and Dany and being like, who's right? But they're both wrong. And just them kind of, or one of them realizing that.
What does Jorah tell Dany a long time ago? That the small folk do not care.
Exactly.
About
I think that's going to be the key going into the end of Game of Thrones, because I think the one thing that stands out for Cersei the most is that she does not give a crap about people, poor people, people who are beneath her, peasants, whatever it is, she doesn't care. And I think that's a big factor going in.
I love those final thoughts there. Rachel, what do you have?
I think this episode was an achievement, and I think that it did come to pass that what we said last week about last week's episode and this week's episode being a wonderful movie. You know, it's a 1-2 parter that picks up right where the other one left off, and it's a beautiful counterpoint. Some things in this episode will stick with me as prominent memories of this series. I mean, the Dothraki charge, Arya's entire arc in this. I thought the Melisandre arc in this was great.
Loved it.
Theon's full circle moment, Jorah's death. I mean, the aerial dragon fight. There was so much spectacle that was grounded in heart and character and the emotion that we've built up over 7.5 years. And, you know, battle strategies and who died and the, you know, sort of number of our characters that made it all the way through might be improbable, but it kind of don't care because Brienne made it, which was my big hope. Yeah. And I hope Ghost made it. I'm
being told that the trailer for, not to give away spoilers, the trailer for next week's episode, Ghost is visible in the background of one shot. So
and a sigh of relief.
We seem to have some light confirmation that Ghost lived.
We're hearing reports now that Ghost has survived.
I feel like you'd have to see. They wouldn't kill. They
wouldn't waste the Ghost.
I don't think so.
Okay, Rachel. In closing.
So just in closing, I think that this was an achievement and a hell of one, and will go down in history. It's just like ridiculous for having been a television show, and kudos to everybody involved. And you know, the emotion was there, which was what I need. You know, I love the spectacle and the battles and everything else, but if it's not rooted in character, if it's not rooted in my emotion with these characters, then, you know, it sort of like slides in one ear and out the other, and this certainly wasn't that.
I agree with you there. Lon, final thoughts before you go produce an entire other show.
I kept thinking a lot about the Lord of the Rings comparisons. A lot of people were like, this is very different from Helm's Deep, and maybe that's part of the marketing that they were promoting this so much as like, it's longer than Hell's Deep. It's the most epic battle scene ever. Because it's just so different. Like what Peter Jackson is doing with those Lord of the Rings, it's like, it's history. Tolkien wrote this alternate history, and they're giving it to you like, here's footage of this historical event that's just, it didn't happen because there's goblins in it. And that's just so different from what this is doing and from what this show has always been. And I mean, Game of Thrones books are written in first-person perspective. It's all about getting into the minds of these characters. And that's what I thought was so effective about this episode is it really did feel like you spent a few moments taking in this battle from all of these first-person perspectives of people who are there, standing outside Winterfell or up on the walls or in the crypts or running through the halls trying to get away from these zombies. And that's what it felt like. It felt like a survival horror video game. Like I was reminded of Last of Us, which is a lot of throw the thing to distract the zombie so you can run into the other room. And that's what it felt like, that moment-to-moment terror of it's going to pop out at me and kill me. And I thought that's what they did a really good job of bringing to light.
Yeah, you guys are taking all the great words, and I'll defer to your expertise here. Achievement is a great word. The different styles within the fight, the emotional pull, and Andres, I think you're still going to get some deaths that you want there.
I'm excited.
I love to see them, except for Grey Worm.
Except for Grey Worm.
It's the last shot of the series. Grey Worm and Narth with Missandei.
I will cry. I will raise my hands and cry.
My final thoughts is this. I watched this. This has been a 7+ year journey, 7 seasons plus now, but a couple of year and a half between the 7 and 8. Of course, this has been a long time coming, and it builds up to this moment. And this was an achievement indeed. And go with your gut. If you're listening and you're trying to break it down, you're doing here. We don't actually do that here at Casterly Talk. If you listen to us, we talk, we dig, we have questions, we have thoughts, we have things we want to see. But at the end of the day, we are letting our emotions tell the story here and how we're breaking it down. And our emotions are definitely affected and removed. And as I sat there sobbing, watching Ian Glenn as Jorah Mormont die, that is my feeling this episode. It got me. It got to me. It did its job. And wow, what a feat. And we still have 3 more to go. That is it for this week. Don't forget to follow my friends here on all the things they do, including Lon. You can follow him at Lon's and Watching Thrones.
Yep. We'll be tomorrow morning. There'll be a bunch of other smart people talking about all this same stuff.
Absolutely. Rachel?
Instagram and Twitter at Rachel J. Cushing.
You know her as the Crusher. Andres Cabrera.
Yeah, Instagram and Twitter at Squad Leader Ace. Also on First Cut, the YouTube channel for the Meaning of Podcast.
Absolutely. He and Robert Butler III do some great work over there. I hope you guys are listening to that. You can follow me at Ken Napzok. Go to my website, kennapzok.com, for information on where to buy my book, pre-order, Why We Love Star Wars. May 15th, it's out. That is that. All right. I'm hitting the road. I'm going to Vegas, and I'm going to play them damn Game of Thrones slots, and I'm going to win, because that's what happened here today. Arya won the day. We'll see you next time on Casterly Talk.